Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Down South Salvation Podcast. For this week's episode, we have our guest, Reverend Todd Stepp. But before we jump into his faith journey and what he's got going on nowadays, why don't I open us in prayer? Most gracious God, we humbly beseech thee for thy holy Catholic Church. Fill it with all truth and all peace. Where it is corrupt, purge it. Where it is an error, direct it. Where anything is amiss, reform it. Where it is right, strengthen and confirm it. Where it is in want, furnish it. Where it is divided and rent asunder, make up the breaches of it through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Different step. So I guess the best place to start is kind of the beginning. Just give us a little bit of a walk down of how you ended up in the ministry and your faith journey.
Sure. Well, I am ordained as an elder through the Church of the Nazarene. In fact, this past Thursday marks 29 years since I was ordained. And the Church of the Nazarene is a Wesleyan Holiness expression of Methodism. So I grew up in the Church of the Nazarene. Actually, when I was born, our family was attending a Wesleyan church. A year after the merger between the Wesleyan Methodist and the Pilgrim Holiness. Shortly after I was born, our entire extended family moved to the Church of the Nazarene, and I've been a part of that ever since. I attended Trevecca Nazarene College back then, university now, to do my bachelor's degree in religion. And my Master's of Divinity degree, I did it at Nazarene Theological Seminary in Kansas City. And my Doctor of Ministry degree, I did at Asbury Theological Seminary. That whole educational thing, out of high school, I wasn't really planning on going to college. I had experienced a call to ministry, but my call to ministry was kind of in stages, in ministry in general, and then it became a call to preach, and then it became a call to pastor. And so out of high school, I wasn't planning on going to college. I had signed up for what our denomination at that time had, home study courses, and I was going to do that. I had signed up for that. I had signed up for my books. My books hadn't come in, and it was during camp as a just graduated senior from high school. I went into camp and church camp and was asked, am I going to go to school? In our region would be Olivet, Nazarene University. No, I'm not going to go to college. But on Thursday, around an altar in prayer, I had one of the most, I guess, the clearest voice from God that I've had, which was this. Maybe there's a reason why your books haven't come in, dummy. And so I got up from the altar and I knew right then I was going to Olivet Nazarene University. It was a shock to my parents when I got back home in the middle of the summer. They had no plans for me to go to college because I told them I wasn't going. Didn't even know if I could get in, really. I did the SAT test during the week of orientation at the college. And anyway, so I ended up in that direction. And after my freshman year, I transferred down to Trevecca. Had a clear sense of calling to go to Nazarene Theological Seminary after I graduated from Trevecca. And after I graduated from NTS, I entered into full-time pastoral ministry. The first church I was at was in Greencastle, Indiana. I was there for 12 and a half years. And then I pastored in Evansville, Indiana, for a period of time. Then I moved in the area where I'm at now and actually took on a United Methodist church. And we'll probably get into that a little bit later. But that's a little bit about my faith journey and ministry journey. I should say I'm been married to my wife, Bobby. It'll be 33 years in August. She is a science teacher and chair of the science department at Christian Academy of Indiana. We have two adult children. Our oldest, Sarah, and her husband, Dakota. We just moved them about 4 weeks ago from this area to Florida. and they took my 3 grandkids with them to Florida. And I'm not entirely happy about that move, but that is what it is. Our son, Matt, is also in the ministry. He is a licensed minister in the Church of the Nazarene, moving towards ordination. He's the worship pastor at Church on the Hill, Church of the Nazarene in McMinnville, Oregon. And he is getting married in September to Abby, and we'll be flying out for that. So we're excited for that. We're excited for my daughter and her family and the new start that they have in Florida as well. Just kind of wish it was a little bit closer so we could see them and the grandkids a little bit more often. And that's probably what, that's a good start with me, I guess.
So, how did you end up interested in the more liturgical, sacramental Christianity while also being in the Church of the Nazarene?
Yeah, that's a good question. Good way to ask that. Well, um, so in the Wesleyan holiness tradition at large, there are a couple of streams actually. So there's what we might refer to as the 19th century holiness movement mindset, and that's a little bit different than the classical Wesleyan understanding of things. They're similar, but they have a little different ideas. So when I was at Trevecca, I gained what I would call a classical Wesleyan theological background. And then whenever I went to Nazarene Theological Seminary, that continued on there. At NTS and Nazarene Theological Seminary, I also became, I would say I was introduced to the early church fathers, but really I had some of that introduction in college, but it did not stick. It didn't make a connection with me there. So I gained a better knowledge of the early church at Nazarene Theological Seminary. But one pivotal change was I took Wesleyan sacramental theology from Rob Staples, and he had a fantastic book that he wrote, Outward Sign and Inward Grace, the Place of Sacraments in Wesleyan Spirituality. Well, he came from a classical Wesleyan perspective as well. I remember in that class, starting out, when we began talking about infant baptism, I still have the paper. I said, I want to believe in infant baptism, but I just don't. You're going to have to convince me. And by the end of that course, I was thoroughly convinced. I was, so for those of you who are listening, you might not know, in the Church of the Nazarene, we've always provided for and had in our articles of faith infant baptism. But in the 30s, we also added a ritual for infant dedication. And so people can choose. And at this part in our history, most people had chosen infant dedication. So I remember in college, a worship class, and the professor there asked, do we believe in infant baptism? And I said, no. And at that point, I was licensed as a minister. So that's considered clergy. It's on the road towards ordination. And he said, well, let's look. And he opened up the manual, which is our book of discipline, went to the articles of faith, and lo and behold, we did believe in infant baptism. I just didn't know that. So I became convinced. I learned of Wesley's sacramental theology. I really began to understand that he was an Anglican. The Church of the Nazarene and much of the holiness movement, we've been firmly committed to Wesley's evangelical emphasis and emphasis of holiness of heart and life. But that whole Anglican liturgical sacramental thing has kind of been left behind. So I began to be introduced to that in seminary. Meanwhile, I also attended what was the most high church Nazarene church I'd ever experienced. And it really wasn't real liturgical. It was kind of mainstream, I would say. I mean, we had the various scripture readings from the lectionary and that kind of thing, but that was all new to me. So I'm experiencing that, the introduction to the fathers, the introduction to Wesley's sacramental theology and his liturgical understanding, this church that I'm attending. And then Robert Weber came to town. And if your listeners do not know Robert Webber, they need to look up Robert Webber, the late Robert Webber now. He did not come to our seminary, but he came and did a workshop at another location in Kansas City, and I went to that. Robert Webber is a person who moved from being a Baptist to becoming an Episcopalian. Um, he has written a tremendous amount of stuff on worship. His complete library of Christian worship, his ancient future series that he has, and a book that's been highly influential for me, Evangelicals on the Canterbury Trail, Why Evangelicals Are Attracted to the Liturgical Church. I resonate so strongly with that. So that's where that whole thing began. When I left seminary, I was introduced to the Order of St. Luke, which was based in the United Methodist Church. I became a member of that order for a number of years before leaving the OSL. While I was pastoring in Greencastle, I began attending the Eucharist service on Wednesday at noon at a local Episcopal church. Did that for a number of years there. When I moved to Evansville, sought out another Anglican church and attended there on Wednesday. So I had, through the Order of St. Luke and through the various Anglican settings, really became familiar with, first of all, John Wesley's version of the Book of Common Prayer, the Sunday service for the Methodists in North America, and then also the other various prayer books, and began praying the daily office of morning and evening prayer. So that's kind of my trajectory. I began to understand that Wesley's doctrine of holiness was grounded in the liturgical sacramental worship of the Church of England. And so that's my trajectory, and that's how I ended up in that mindset.
All right. I would pretty fundamentally agree with you. I've been kind of on this journey the last year or so, because I actually grew. So I actually started attending with my grandparents a United Methodist church that's not Methodist anymore for a couple reasons, but like not United Methodist. It's still technically Methodist in its theology and everything. It's just more of an independent Methodist church now. And then when we moved in with my step family, my mom started taking us to the local Wesleyan church, and that's eventually the church I got baptized into. And now I've been attending the local Episcopal church in conjunction with the local Wesleyan church. Approximately, oh goodness, a year and a half or so.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been walking through this whole sacramental and liturgical journey myself, and I actually have Evangelicals on the Canterbury Trail. It's on the bookcase back there. I haven't read it yet because I'm trying to work through C.S. Lewis right now, and I've also got a book of Wesley's 52 standard sermons, or yes, that I've also been working through. So fun.
Yeah.
But
yeah. So. Which version there's two different versions of Evangelicals on Canterbury Trail.
I actually have the older one because that was the one that I could find on Amazon.
Yeah. I would, now Lester Ruth is the one who reprinted a second edition and revised that edition. Lester was my professor of worship whenever I was doing my doctoral work at Asbury. And so I greatly appreciate him tremendously. I owe him much. But I have to say, I really do think I prefer the original. And part of that, I don't know, maybe I've read them both more than once. I know I've read the original more than once. Maybe I need to go back and reread them. But I know whenever Robert Webber wrote his book, there was basically the Episcopal Church was well, it wasn't the only version of Anglicanism, but it was the main version of Anglicanism in the U.S. And since then, you have the Anglican Church in North America. So he's focused on the Episcopal Church. And what Lester Ruth does is he expands it. He really expands it beyond Anglicanism as well. And so anyway, I mean, there's value in both of those. But I guess Weber's is the first one I read. So
Right. I mean, it's just the one I could find. I actually looked for the second edition. It actually seems fairly hard, or at the time that I was looking, it was fairly hard to find a reasonably priced copy of it.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. The stories, the testimonials are one of the big changes. So the testimonials, as far as I understand it, that are in Weber's book are not in the new book. There are different testimonials in the new book. All of Robert Weber's stuff that he wrote prior to the testimonials, that's in the new book, though. So,
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. So I kind of alluded to it earlier. So let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. So you have a blog that's called, what is it? The Wesleyan Anglican.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
So let's talk about that for a bit, because I feel like that would be a good prelude into the other thing you have that you've been gearing up to, I guess, basically soft relaunch.
Right. Yeah, working on it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the blog first, though, because the blog's interesting, I think.
Well, I appreciate that. Frankly, I've not been as active on that as I should be. I have been in transition. I think I mentioned to you before. I'm new where I'm at in the church that I'm at right now, and I've been teaching for Wesley Seminary at Indiana Wesleyan. So trying to get everything lined up. But I started that blog as a way for me to express. So this gets back to in the Nazarene setting, a way for me to be able to express this liturgical and sacramental emphasis while pastoring in a Nazarene church that really was not all that on board with that, right? Um, so I can't really actually remember exactly when I started that blog. I'd have to go back and look. I wish I had now, but I know that I was at a church and was doing very, very minimal kinds of changes with what they were used to at all. I was just trying to, be a part of the church and everything. But I used the blog as an outlet for me to be able to express the sacramental and liturgical aspects of Wesleyanism. And yeah, so I mean, I would write on some other things too, if it was Wesley related or, Anglican related. If it was part of, denominational news or that kind of thing, I would write on that as well. But that was really what I think caused me to start writing a blog in the first place. And yeah.
Okay. Okay. So now let's move into the other thing that you have, which is the Wesleyan Anglican Society.
Yeah.
Which, my understanding anyway, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously you would know better than I would, but my understanding is you're getting ready to soft relaunch the society.
That is what we're planning. That's what we're hoping to be able to do. Had a date set for that, and having to back off on that date a little bit and keep going. It's taking a little bit of time, but the Wesleyan Anglican Society. So that really does. I'm glad that we started kind of with where I was at and with the blog, because it really does come out of that. So when I became aware of Facebook and started on Facebook, started a group on Facebook called Wesleyan Anglican. So that became an outgrowth of the blog. And a number of people joined that group. And we began talking in that group about starting some kind of real group outside of outside of Facebook. And we really kind of wrestled, okay, how is this like a society in terms of academic society? So we were familiar, most of us talking were familiar with like the Wesleyan Theological Society, so something like that. Or is this more of a religious order like the Order of St. Luke, or some of the classical orders out there? What are we trying to do here? And we landed with the name Wesleyan Anglican Society. We thought society is probably a good Wesleyan name anyway, because you had his society meetings and the band meetings and all of that. So we decided to do that. We have our vision and our purpose, and we do have a set of disciplines that we ask for those who want to join the society. And whenever we started, there was a couple things that in my mind that I wanted to see happen anyway. One of those is that this really is kind of a comparison with the Order of St. Luke. So as I mentioned, I was a part of the Order of St. Luke for a number of years and then left the order. And one of the things that I wanted to do, this was going to be something similar to that, but no place like they are in terms of organization and everything. They're just, they're well organized. But one of the things I wanted to do, whereas the Order of St. Luke, though it was based in the United Methodist Church, it really was much broader in scope. It had members there from various traditions, Old Catholic tradition and different traditions that were there. So it wasn't specifically Wesleyan or Anglican. And we wanted to narrow this down so that so that we felt like this would be something that would be practical, applicable for those with a Wesleyan theology. So we wanted to do that, make it more focused on Wesleyanism, Anglicanism, that kind of a thing. And then, frankly, another thing, one of the reasons that I left the OSL is they began to take on, how do I say this? So the issues that have divided denominations these last few decades, they were in a position of saying they're not taking any position on that, but they ended up doing that by virtue of certain publications that came out, and unfortunately, that appeared in the book For All the Saints, which was kind of a book of feast days, with hagiographies from various people throughout church history and also more specifically Wesleyan tradition. I had argued for the inclusion of 3 names on that hadn't been in there, and then I was asked to write the hagiographies for that, and frankly, I was going to purchase that book for all of our Board of General Superintendents and send that to them. And then I read, I think, the story of Lazarus in there and just realized, oh, no, can't do that. That's not gonna work. And so that was a catalyst for me leaving there. And so I wanted an alternative group that wasn't going to be promoting that kind of thing. And so that's kind of what was going on in my mind whenever we began to form this. And we formed it in 2013. It has lost traction over the years. Our main way of dialogue has been through Facebook and that Facebook group, and that has produced some good dialogue, but we kind of lost connections, and so we're trying to do a relaunch of that, a soft reboot of that, working on rewriting our Constitution a little bit, and looking for a couple of added officers for that as well. So we have to have that names in place before we have the meeting. And so you have to have the Constitution done and names in place. And then also the issue of trying to find an electronic medium that can handle a meeting like that. So that's what we're working on right now. And hopefully we'll get that done soon here in the near future.
Awesome. Awesome. So, I mean, is it because I looked at the Constitution, the old Constitution for a society before, and it really does seem to kind of toe the line between a religious order and an academic society. I mean, it seems to toe it pretty well based on the
Yeah.
old Constitution. I don't know what the new one's going to look like, obviously, but y'all would. I mean, I'm assuming not much is going to change.
Right. There won't be a whole lot that changes in it, I don't think. Um, if proposals go through, some of the specifics, it makes references in the doctrinal position section about the World Methodist Council and the Global Wesleyan Alliance, those kinds of things, and explains the term Methodist in that. I think we're going to kind of revamp a little bit. Some of the language that's in the Constitution is very clearly language of something that's new. And we need to kind of clear that up so that it's something that can stand for a longer period of time. It's interesting, too, I think that in references to the World Methodist Council, a number of denominations that were members of the World Methodist Council are no longer members of the World Methodist Council. And then there are new denominations that would probably need to be reflected, like the new Global Methodist Church. So I think that we need to clean up some of that language, but the main ideas that are there, we want to continue to keep.
I got you. So, I am curious since I myself personally am interested in the society. Are there going to be any fees once we relaunch it, or what?
Yeah. So we initially, and we probably are going to keep language in the Constitution for future on that. We had foreseen that as a good possibility. What we ran into was um, the fact that being a 501c3 costs money. It costs a good amount of money to get that. And so we had a little bit of money that we used for postage and putting together certificates and seals, that kind of thing. But as we were going along, we just did not see either the need at the time or the ability at the time to try to get ourselves to that position of the 501c3. And so we backed off on that. Plus, the money that we did have in the bank that we had it in began charging us. It wasn't doing that at the beginning. And so we had money that was just disappearing as we were going along. And so we pulled that out. Um, it will take a little bit more organization for us and a little bit more maturity as a society before I think we're up to that. Now we'll talk about that um, whenever we have this relaunch meeting and see where everybody's at with that. As we go along, the hope and the goal for us is to have some in-person meetings. And it would be great to be able to have an annual meeting, to get to that place where we're having an annual meeting that's in person and be able to bring in special speakers and those kinds of things. And whenever we're at that point, then we would need to probably have fees to be able to finance that kind of a thing. So we'll talk about it more, but at this point with the soft relaunch, we're not going to be, I don't foresee us having fees for a little while anyway.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so now for a really contentious question.
Okay.
What is your favorite prayer book?
Okay. Well, I will tell you, I have two answers for that. So, frankly, the prayer book that I use personally is Wesley's conservative revision, the Sunday service for the Methodists in North America. I use that for morning and evening prayer. I like, if I were to utilize a prayer book, one of the existing prayer books for worship, public worship for our people, it would not be Wesley's version. And the real reason behind that is, even for morning and evening prayer, I think the real reason is because we just don't speak that language, right? It's Old English, and we don't speak the language anymore. And for me, I'm used to that myself with morning and evening prayer, so I'm fine with that. But it's the same thing whenever I talk with people about using the King James version of the Bible in public. I will say I'll use the example of Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare. So I'll say, when Juliet says, "Wherefore art thou, Romeo? Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo?" I ask people, what is she saying? And almost always people say, she's saying, "Where are you?" And that's not at all what "Wherefore art thou" is about. It's asking, why are you? The Capulets and the Montagues, why are you this? And so we run into that kind of issue. So I wouldn't do that for public service. So what would I do if I'm choosing to use one of them? I would use the 2019 book that was put out by the Anglican Church in North America. I like it. I think that it gives you enough options and variety in there. I've used portions of that in public worship. The one thing I don't like is, and this is a complaint for pretty much everything that I've seen that tries to redo the general prayer confession, and that is, they leave out, if they stick close to the language, which is that we confess that we have from time to time sinned in word, thought, and deed. They leave out "from time to time" in that, which lends itself much closer to the idea that we daily have to sin in word, thought, and deed, which of course is not something that fits Wesleyan theology, and because of our understanding of sin. But so I like the time "from time to time." Most everybody gets rid of that, and then they do an entirely different prayer that's supposed to be a general confession. That's not general; it's specific, and it is, we have not loved you with our whole heart. We have not loved our neighbor as ourselves. That's not a general confession. That's a specific confession, and that's a specific confession that that happens after you've prayed that God would cleanse the thoughts of our hearts by the inspiration of your Holy Spirit, that we may perfectly love you and worthily magnify your holy name. We're kind of negating that as a possibility even. And so it goes against, I think, a Wesleyan understanding of Christian perfection, entire sanctification. So I don't like that. But that aside, I like pretty much most of everything else that's in that prayer book. So 2019, yeah. When I started attending the Episcopal Church's Eucharistic service, of course, they were using the 79 book, and that's what I became familiar with at the time. But I do think that the 2019 is closer to the 1662, but in modern language. So yeah, that would be my two favorites: the Sunday service and the 2019.
Very nice. I personally am a 1979 fan myself, in addition to being a 1662 fan as well.
Right? Yeah, I have that one too. So.
Oh yes, but I also have a 28. The only one I really don't have, well, I guess the only two I don't have are Wesley's Sunday service and the 2019. I just don't have them. Which 2019 is kind of hard to get right now.
Well, you can not a physical copy, but
Well, yeah, you can get the digital copy, and
yeah,
I do have that, but I've come to find over the years, and I say that like I'm old. I'm only 28. I've come to find that I really hate reading books on a computer screen.
I agree. I agree. I agree.
There's just something about holding this book in your hand when you read it and use
Yeah.
it. I don't know. I can't explain it. And it's the same with the Bible. I just can't. I just don't like. I'll use them. I'll use the app on my phone, or I'll use BibleGateway.com or whatever to reference something quick. But to
Yeah.
actually do like a evening prayer or something, I can't. I can't. I just
Yeah.
can't.
Well, I would say there are a couple options with the with Wesley's. Um, you can order through the Order of Saint Luke, and they have they title it. Hang on a second here. They title it John Wesley's Prayer Book, the Sunday Service of the Methodists in North America, with introduction, notes, and commentary by James F. White.
Ooh.
And that I think is helpful. It is a facsimile copy. So that means that you're going to get the S's that look like F's or whatever. And it's that old type that's there. But the James White stuff is cool. It is a, well, what I would call paperback, but I'm sure that it has a different name for the cover. It's not a hardback.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with that is if you actually use it, if you use it for a long time, it will fall apart. I've gone through a few of those books. But then there's also one that's come out. Hang on a second, I'll grab it over here. You can get it in hardback, and the reason I had to grab it is I'm trying to remember the name, the person who put this together. Jonathan Johnson. And it is not the old print, facsimile print. So he's redone the whole thing. So it's more legible. He did make a couple of errors in the hardback version, and I don't know if they're corrected. I think that they were. We talked a little bit about it. But you can get that in hardback, so it's going to stand up. And I have a leather edition, which I don't think he's even offering those anymore. That was not cheap on that. I just figured, well, if I'm president of the Wesleyan Anglican Society, I ought to have it in a leather bound, so I did. But anyway, it's easier to read. The print is a little small on it, but that will hold up a lot better. So you have two different versions. He calls his version of it John Wesley's The Book of Common Prayer. And so that's the main title on that. But so anyway, it depends on, I think it's valuable to have both, frankly, because I think the James White stuff is valuable in the other one. And I think that it's nice to have something you can actually use and over a long period of time with the hardback. So
I got you. I'll have to look into getting some of those then, because it sounds. I think there's a digital version of John Wesley's out there somewhere, and I think I've skimmed through it before.
I have a link to one that actually comes from the British Methodist folks. So I'm not sure if they've done any changes to it, because obviously John Wesley wrote it for North America. He didn't know what the government was going to look like here, and so it's very ambiguous in there in the prayer for the government. So I don't know what they did in Britain with it, but there is that version that's there as well. Yeah.
Right. I got you. Well, I've got 3 more questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. So, firstly, and I'm just looking for really off the cuff answers, because these aren't part of any of the questions that I sent you.
Okay.
So, do you, in your own personal opinion, have you noticed younger people, and by younger people I mean under 40s, looking for a more liturgical experience in church?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have read a lot on that. I've seen stories about that a lot, and then um, I have my son, my son's 26 and he's a worship pastor. Like I said, he's talked to me some about some of his friends and colleagues. The church where he serves as worship pastor is not liturgical minded, but he has some of that background from me. And he's talked about that some. Where I'm at right now, before I came here, we closed a United Methodist church that I was serving on loan to the United Methodists. And it was understood whenever I went in that probably is what I was supposed to be doing with that church. It was kind of a chaplain role, although I was there for quite a long time. At any rate, for our two closing services, we had they wanted to hire somebody to come and play the piano. We had lost our pianist a few years earlier, and they were just having to deal with me playing the guitar. But so we hired two people that had been students of my wife's, and one of those persons who came, who's a college student now, had an evangelical background. In fact, I know that he had recently played at filled in at a Nazarene church too. So he was very intrigued and very interested in what we were doing, because although we were closing that church, it was United Methodist, but it very much followed a fourfold pattern of worship, and it also incorporated much of the liturgy in that. So I dressed, I can't remember when he was there, it's either in the alb or the cassock surplice and the preaching bands and that. And so we, used the collective purity. We did the great Thanksgiving prayer for the communion, and we followed that pattern. And we had other, notable symbols and things going on in the service. He was very intrigued by all of that, very interested in all of that. I told him that I was going to be coming here, and that we would be at the Georgetown Church of the Nazarene. We are going to be restarting this church, and at the first of Advent, and it will follow a Wesleyan Anglican kind of pattern. And so, he said, let him know whenever we get going with all of that. So I've seen that from him personally. We're not in a position yet. We're kind of, this next week, we actually will get a permission to officially have our name changed. And like I said, we'll be launching in Advent. So we are just kind of laying a foundation at a church where they are not used to any of this either. So we're going to be gathering a core group together. And so hopefully as we do that and we make that launch, I would be able to come back and tell you that, yes, indeed, that's what we're finding. But I've had some experience with that, and I've read a lot about that as well.
Okay.
People wanting to find something that has a rootedness and that is connected to the ancient church and is not just, the latest fad. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So second to last question. Mm-hmm. Given this is going to sound like a deep question, but I'm really not looking for a deep answer. Given the existence of the continuum Anglican churches, the ACNA, and the Episcopal Church, and the United Methodist Church, and the Global Methodist Church, and all the different Wesleyan Holiness denominations that we have, and given all the differing opinions on a variety of issues that I'm not even going to go into because there's too many to even talk about in one episode, do you feel that there is room for cooperation between the different Anglican and Methodist and Holiness denominations?
I think that there's room. I think that it's going to partially fall along the lines of the divisions that have already happened in the denominations. So, for example, the Church of the Nazarene is a part of, I had mentioned, the World Methodist Council. We used to be a part of that. We're part of the Global Wesleyan Alliance. And the Global Wesleyan Alliance includes the Free Methodist Church, the Wesleyan Church, and then a number of other churches that are less Methodist in their heritage, but have taken on Wesleyan holiness theology. The Global Methodist Church, as I understand it, has just joined the Global Wesleyan Alliance. So I think that there will be a lot closer communication and cooperation there. I'm looking forward to seeing what that dynamic will look like in that. I think that there's been some dialogue of some degree, I don't know how official, between the Global Methodist and the ACNA, the Anglican Church in North America. I would love for that kind of thing to happen. I would love for my denomination to be a part of something like that. I think that there will be a distance between these denominations and those who, from which some of these other churches have split off. So I know that there are some Nazarenes that have served in some capacity in some Episcopal churches, and I think are currently doing that. But I don't know how long that'll be, frankly, allowed. I think that goes from a district to district, but I don't know that there will be as much interest in that as there would be talking with the Anglican Church in North America. The continuing Anglicans, I think that they have their own issues with trying to cooperate with each other, and they have certain lines in this that I think that I don't know that they would be that open talking to Wesleyan groups, frankly. Their commitments to the prayer book, especially many of them, the Anglo-Catholic side of things, they are also strongly opposed to women in orders, holy orders. The ACNA is divided on that, but most Wesleyan Methodist denominations affirm women in holy orders. So that would be an issue there. But I would love to see the Church of the Nazarene talk with the Anglican Church in North America. I would love that, because I think that they might help influence us. And the ACNA, they have the thing about being a part of an Anglican church is that you get the liturgy and the sacramental theology, but there for a Wesleyan, you also have to put up with a very broad spectrum of theology, from Anglo-Catholic to Calvinist to the Arminian Wesleyan, evangelical, and you just have a much broader range theologically that's there. So anyway, I don't know if that helps my answer.
No, it wasn't a bad answer. It was a good answer. It was a good answer. Because I mean, it was, in fairness, it was a very broad, very open-ended question. So there wasn't really a specific answer I was looking for, I guess. So,
Okay.
But final question for you: aside from the resources that we've already kind of talked about in our conversation leading up to this point, what resources would you recommend for anyone looking into Wesleyan holiness, or maybe the more sacramental theology along, in the Anglican Methodist stream?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I pulled some things just for a question like that. I would say for those in the Wesleyan holiness tradition already, I would really recommend Rob Staples' book, Outward Sign and Inward Grace, The Place of Sacraments in the Wesleyan Spirituality. That is the first book on sacramental theology that has come out of the holiness tradition, but he takes a very classical Wesleyan position on most things. There's a couple things that I would, disagree with my professor on that, but that book is a foundational book, I think, for those in the Wesleyan holiness tradition. Beyond his book is based on a much more in-depth book by Ole Borgen, which is John Wesley on the Sacraments, a definitive study of John Wesley's theology of worship. That book is that's an older book, it's a 1972 book. But if you read Staples and you want to read more, that would be the book to read. For a book that I found influential when I was doing my doctoral dissertation was Henry Knight's The Presence of God in the Christian Life, John Wesley and the Means of Grace. But that's going to cost you a pretty penny, I think, for that. So that's some of the sacramental stuff from a Wesleyan point of view. I mean, there's some other things. Jason Vickers has edited a book called Wesleyan Theology of the Eucharist. And there's some other books out there like that, but I would recommend Rob Staples first of all. For Wesley, there's Wesley's works. The standard sermons, that would be a good place to start with him. Kenneth Kinghorn has the standard sermons in modern English. That might be easier if people are not used to reading older English. That might be easier to look at. That it's a 3-volume set on that. Another book that kind of I think I had in college was John Wesley, edited by Albert Outler. And I think that will give you a good overview of John Wesley's own thought. I would say if you want to know about John Wesley himself, I think Henry Rack's Reasonable Enthusiast, John Wesley and the Rise of Methodism, is still probably the standard in that. If you just want a really easy introduction to Wesleyan theology, it's entitled An Introduction to Wesleyan Theology by William Greathouse and H. Ray Dunning. That's through Nazarene Publishing, or the Foundry now we call it. That would be it's a small book, and so that would be a good place to start with that. Anything by Robert Webber, frankly, anything by Robert Webber. But hey, the Evangelicals on the Canterbury Trail. I mean, if you're evangelical and interested, that's good. That's good. So that's what some of our people here at the church where I've just started have picked that up and read that, and had some good responses from that. So yeah.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
All right. So that was all the questions I had for you. Do you typically at the end I'll open it up for you to ask me any questions you might have. So do you have any questions for me?
Well, I really, I wanted to ask you, you've already told me some about this your background with the Methodist, Wesleyan, and the Episcopal Church. So that kind of was what I was really most interested in coming into all of this, finding out about that, because it is good to hear people's stories on how they have landed where they've landed, and the discovery that's there of a greater, for me anyway, a more complete Wesleyan way of understanding the Christian life. So
Right. And to clarify, just in case you were curious, the Episcopal Church I attend locally here, we tend to actually cut against the grain a lot when it comes to what most people typically think of when they think Episcopalian.
well, I know that there are Episcopal churches out there like that. So I listen to Anglican Unscripted with George Conger
But I listen to them.
Ryan Dankers is a good former Nazarene, I believe, a good Wesleyan scholar, and he's in the Episcopal Church now. And so, yeah, so I know that's out there, and that's good. I'm glad that's out there.
I need to email those guys, see if they want to come on the podcast.
That
would be an interesting conversation for sure.
Yeah.
But all right, cool. Thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I'm glad all of our technical issues didn't come up this time.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the invitation, and I am Yeah, I'm glad that you've not had those issues. So, for those who didn't know, we tried this before. So,
All right. Well, again, thank you for coming on. Everybody listening, thank you for listening. And I'll see y'all in the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Down South Salvation Podcast. I hope you found our discussion insightful and engaging. If you enjoyed the show, please consider liking this episode and sharing it with your friends and family. It really helps me reach more listeners like you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also follow me on X, formerly Twitter, at DS Salvation and Instagram at Down South Salvation for updates and more. For additional content and to stay updated, find me on YouTube, Substack, and all major podcast platforms at the Down South Salvation Podcast. Your support means the world to me, and I look forward to bringing you more exciting episodes soon. Until next time, stay blessed.